My name is Jim Worden. I was part of the RAF during the Second World War, serving as a tail gunner on a bomber. But this story is not about me. It is about a man I met years later, a man whose path was marked by loyalty, betrayal, and a unique ability to survive. In 1959, far from the RAF, I enlisted in the Foreign Legion. It was in Sidi Bel Abbes where I met Brückner. At that time, his name was not Brückner, but Brockmann, a first corporal of German origin. He was a reserved man, but we soon connected. He spoke impeccable English and always seemed eager to practice it. Over time, he confided his story to me, and boy, was it incredible. Brückner had served in the Legion since 1939, stationed in Syria. But everything changed when the armistice was signed between France and Germany. One of the conditions was that France repatriate the German citizens serving in its ranks. Brückner was sent back to Germany, where the authorities imprisoned him along with other legionnaires for having served in a foreign army. However, Germany soon realized that men like Brückner were valuable. With his experience in the desert, he was transferred to the 361st Panzer Infantry Regiment of the Africa Corps, which was made up primarily of former legionnaires. At first, these men were not trusted and were relegated to minor jobs. But the Allied advance in North Africa pushed them to the front. Brückner, assigned to the 2nd Company, soon proved his worth. In October 1941, he was promoted to sergeant. But war is cruel. In one of the battles, Brückner was wounded and taken prisoner by the British. When he regained consciousness, he was in the General Hospital near Shelafa, west of the Great Bitter Lake. From there, he was transferred to the Cascaferret prison camp. Brückner, astute and pragmatic, managed to avoid hard labor and secured a position in the office as an interpreter. His command of English and French, combined with his rejection of Nazism, made him an asset to British military intelligence. He gained the trust of his British captors and was recruited by Captain Book for clandestine operations. On June 12, 1942, Brückner, now part of the Long-Range Desert Group, embarked on a high-risk mission. His objective was to infiltrate a German airfield near Matruba and sabotage it. The Long-Range Desert Group was famous for their quick and discreet incursions into enemy territory. They were few in number, but their precision and knowledge of the terrain made them a real threat to the Germans. Brückner, with his knowledge of airfields and his previous experience, was a key player in this mission. However, his loyalty was not with the men traveling with him that night. This was a small but vital detail that the members of the Long-Range Desert Group missed. Captain Bray gave the final instructions. The team was to approach the airfield on foot, place explosives on the parked planes, and sabotage the fuel reserves. It was a quick operation that depended on the element of surprise, but Brückner had other plans. While the group inspected the positions, he excused himself, stating that he needed to approach for a more detailed reconnaissance. No one suspected anything. He took advantage of the darkness to head directly toward the German lines with his hands raised. He introduced himself to the guards. "I am Brückner from the 361st Panzer Regiment. I bring urgent information about an imminent attack." Brückner was quickly brought into the presence of a German officer. In front of him, he detailed the British tactics, the number of men, the approach routes, and the objectives within the airfield. The Germans acted quickly, organizing a patrol to intercept the group. Before they could approach, the British group had to retreat quickly, leaving behind the explosives and any possibility of accomplishing their mission. The operation had failed. Epilogue. Years later, in 1965, I was stationed in the 2nd Foreign Regiment of Paratroopers. There I met a German non-commissioned officer who had been a fighter pilot in the Luftwaffe. During one of our talks, I told him the story of Brückner. His reaction was unexpected. The non-commissioned officer jumped out of his chair, went to his locker, and took out a bottle of whiskey. He told me, "I will tell you something you will never forget. and began to tell a
Una
story about
noche,
a night on a base
en una
in the
base en
desert.
el desierto,
The
los
German
pilotos
pilots were
alemanes estaban
celebrating a
celebrando un
birthday when they
cumpleaños.
received an alarm
Recibieron
signal.
una señal de
They
alarma,
frustrated a
frustraron
British
un
attack
ataque
and returned to the
británico
party.
y volvieron a la
It
fiesta.
was then that
Fue
a
entonces
disheveled
cuando un
man
hombre
wearing a
desaliñado con
British
uniforme
uniform
británico
and an Arab
y un
scarf
pañuelo
appeared
árabe
among them.
apareció entre
There
ellos.
was your Brückner,
Ahí estaba tu
the pilot
Brückner.
said. But they
Pero
never
nunca
gave
nos
us
dieron
more
más detalles
details
sobre
about
su
his mysterious
misteriosa identidad.
identity.
Y
And
así
so,
quedó el
the
misterio.
mystery remained. After our stay together in the Foreign Legion in 1959, and this conversation with the old German non-commissioned officer, the clues about Brückner's whereabouts ended up buried by the wind and the sands of time, just like the dunes of the desert. Perhaps once his commitment to the Legion was over, he continued his life in a more orderly and simple way. He might have retired to a quiet place and started a family. Although it is hard for me to believe that this was the case, given his unconventional nature. Be that as it may, I kept the promise I made by not telling his story until well into the year 1966, the date when all his deeds, heroic or treacherous, would be prescribed. What were his motivations for changing sides so many times? Brückner seems to have been a pragmatic man, adaptable, and deeply influenced by the extreme circumstances of his time. His constant change of sides was probably not simple betrayal, but a survival strategy and a way to cope with a chaotic world full of uncertainty.